Hi, my name is Kayla McCowan, and today I'll be discussing my paper which covers the compare and contrast of both Spanish nouns and verbs, and English nouns and verbs, well, noun phrases to be exact. The Spanish language is the Romantic language that is commonly spoken in the South America, Central America, Spain, and also here in the US. It's a language that has evolved from the Latin language. In the textbooks, one of the textbooks that I used as reference material for this course is also from a previous tech course that I had taken. It's from a previous, Spanish course that I had taken here at Texas Tech, Spanish 1507. Name of the textbook is Vestimos un breve, if I remember correctly. And basically, my main intent was to examine the common behaviors that might occur between both Spanish nouns and English nouns, as well as Spanish verbs, any possible similarities between Spanish verbs and English verbs. First of all, with the Spanish nouns, Spanish nouns and English nouns, to be exact, we discussed in class that a noun phrase consists of the determinative, the head noun, the noun complement, and the optional noun modifier. And the same can be said in Spanish. However, I did distinctly note that the placement is different. So the main concept for the Spanish nouns was that universal message, was that the ingredients were the same for both the noun phrases. It's just the order that was different. In Spanish, you have your determinative first, your head noun, and then you have your noun modifiers, and it has to go in that order. The only exception that tends to come into play is mainly when numbers are being discussed, and in this case, numbers are placed before the head noun. Also, one thing that I also noted that's a main big difference between English nouns and Spanish nouns is that Spanish nouns tend to have a gender. And while this doesn't necessarily notate a drastic change in how the language is handled, it is something that has to be noted and paid careful attention to when concerning noun modifiers and plurality. For example, for feminine nouns, when discussing them in a plural sense or even in a singular tense, you have to be careful to use the appropriate noun modifier for that. So an example would be la niña is a feminine noun, and so any modifiers that I use after it would have to end in an A, such as seria, which means serious, or trabajadora, Well, no, actually, that's actually one of the few gender neutral concepts that I have also discussed in my paper. Also, when it came to discussing and looking at Spanish verbs, I noted that each mood and tense and timeline that we have potentially discussed in class is also noted in Spanish verbs. Pretty much that's to say that Spanish verbs are pretty much conjugated to handle all moods, tense, and aspects that are pretty much usually have to be implied or interpreted from English sentences that, like we have discussed in class. Essentially, that means they tend to sort of answer more questions in context than than English verbs do. Also, I noted that in conjugation of in the conjugation of Spanish verbs. They also do, depending on the context of the situation for the gender of the group that's being implied, they do tend to take on the empty determinative as well as mood, tense, and aspect as well. I would say that a lot of my research was already commonplace. It is, I would say that the big indicator for anything different about my research compared to what might already be done is just that trying to compare two supposedly different languages that are actually very similar. It's just that the main concept that seemed to come through after completing my paper and the work is just that Spanish tends to make sure that a lot of the message that they want their audience to receive for who's ever speaking it, they be answered without them having to do any extra interpretation work like we've done this semester concerning who did what, when it happened, under whose context, from whose perspective, and so on and so forth. That's the end of my presentation, and hope you have a good day.